So thanks for coming. Thanks, Rosie, for the intro. So I'm going to talk today about a project that I've been leading for the last 2 to 3 years in Puerto Rico. And this has been in collaboration with the Luquillo Long-Term Ecological Research Program. And this is a NSF-funded long-term program that's going on in Puerto Rico. And this has nothing to do with my work here at UVM, so I just wanted to make that clear, like this is not my dissertation here at UVM. So I want to start off by just commenting that Puerto Rico is a small island in the Caribbean, so we're about here, and we're directly on the way of the hurricane trajectory in the Caribbean. And for this reason, we've had a great amount of hurricanes impacting the island through history. But because of climate change, the frequency and intensity of cyclones are increasing worldwide. For Puerto Rico, this has meant that there's an increasing threat of hurricanes, and in 2017, for the first time in history, we had 2 Category 4, almost Category 5 hurricanes struck the island within 2 weeks of each other. Hurricane Irma was in the beginning of September, and Hurricane Maria was kind of in September 20th. And so what does this mean? Besides the obvious humanitarian crisis this costs and increasing political and economic struggles in the island, this transformed ecosystems from looking like this beautiful tropical forest to something like this within a few days. And so this is an incredible transformation of the ecosystem that happened very fast. Scientists have estimated that in between 23 to 31 million trees either were killed or severely damaged all along the island. But we also notice how quickly these forests recover, because in December it already looked like this. So there's a high dynamism of these ecosystems, very fast regeneration, and we're still trying to understand what this means for forest biodiversity and ecosystem services and just ecological dynamics in these habitats. So I want to backtrack a little bit to tell you what I was doing before the hurricanes. I was working for the Tropical Responses to Altered Climate experiment, which is an experiment led by the Forest Service. And I was managing this project, which was focused on understanding the effects of warming on the tropical forest carbon cycle and potential to acclimation. So we had 3 warmed and 3 control plots, and the warm plots were being increased by 4 degrees Celsius all day long, all year round. And we started this experiment, actual warming, in 2016, September, and almost exactly to the year we had the hurricanes. And so this created a great opportunity to try to understand if forests that are already warmer, which might happen in the future, are more susceptible, more vulnerable to hurricanes, and whether this has any impact on recovery and resiliency of these habitats. And so I was working on this. I'm not going to talk about this project a lot more, but that's the website, and I'd be happy to talk more after. While I was working on this project, I really wanted to go back to working on insects and biodiversity, which was what I did in my master's in Costa Rica. And so I developed a side project in my free time to look at how moths are distributed, what is the diversity of moths in the Luquillo Mountains, which is the forest that I was working in. And so the Luquillo Experimental Forest is located on the northeast of the island, and it has 4 main forest types, and I was working on the Tabonuco and Sierra Palm forests, mainly just because of logistic reasons. And I wanted to characterize and do like a baseline survey of moth diversity within these 2 forest types. And the Tabonuco forest is dominated by shade-tolerant, big 30 meters high Tabonuco trees, which are native. And the Sierra Palm are dominated by these palm, which is fast-growing, very thin trunks that occurs mostly in unstable soils and valleys. And so this is a little bit higher elevation, and this is normally within rivers. And so we started sampling, and then this happened. And we wanted to evaluate what the effects on this was also causing on the moth community in these 2 types of habitats. And the interesting thing is that these 2 types of trees have different ways of withstanding hurricane winds. The Sierra Palm has bendy trunks, and the leaves, they lose their leaves very fast or very easily, whereas the Tabonuco tree has interlinking roots, and they grow in families, so this helps them be less susceptible to uprooting. And so there's different ways that they have adapted to hurricanes in the island, and we want to understand what this implies for the diversity that lives there. Just to touch on why I'm focusing on moths, I worked on moths for my master's, and they're actually very, very abundant. More than 90% of the Lepidoptera order is moths, even though we mostly hear about butterflies. They carry many important ecological processes such as pollination, decomposition, predator-prey interaction, so they're very also important for ecosystem services. They have high bioindicator potential. They respond very fast to land use change and habitat disturbance, so we can use them to kind of get some information out of habitat quality. And there really is not a lot of literature on Puerto Rican moth diversity, and also not much literature on how hurricanes impact this group of insects. And the 1992 paper, they evaluated the impact of Hurricane Hugo, which was in 89, but they only did like post-hurricane surveying, which doesn't really say a lot, in my opinion. So we used automatic light traps. This is my collaborator, Dr. Pablo Gutierrez, and we sampled in 6 sites, 3 Tabonuco and 3 Sierra Palm sites, once a month. We started April 2017, sampled until August, and then had a break in September because of the hurricanes, and then sampled from October to March. And then we have a very diligent intern, Alex Flores, that's been spreading, sorting, and identifying the moths in the UPR Entomology Museum. And he's been working on this for more than a year now. So we have been able to identify about 90% of the collection, at least to some taxonomic level, some of them only to families, but something. We have at least 14 families and about 200 morphospecies, but this only includes macromoths because the micromoths are very tiny and we're still trying to go through them, so he's still working on those. So the results that I'm showing today are only on macromoths. This is an ordination plot, so each dot represents a site and a specific date, and the closer together they are means they have more similar species composition. And so what we can see here is that all the Tabonuco and Palm sites pre-hurricane are similar, and all the Tabonuco and Palm sites post-hurricane are similar, but so we can see a complete shift in species composition, but it doesn't matter which type of forest they're in. However, when we looked at abundance and richness specifically within these 2 types of forests, we see that before the hurricanes, they're very similar, but after the hurricanes, Tabonuco definitely is higher in both species number and number of individuals. So what might this mean? Sorry for my arrows. In normal conditions, it seems like Tabonuco and palm forests provide similar habitat for moths, but after hurricane disturbance, Tabonuco forest may provide crucial shelter where the rest of the forest is decimated or really damaged. These big trees maybe provide refuge for biodiversity. And since moths are really important pollinators, this could have big implications for forest recovery and resiliency in the future. And this plays a great role of Tabonuco trees for biodiversity conservation and why it's important to protect these old growth forest remnants in the face of climate change. I'm just going to touch a little bit on our plans for the future. We want to continue processing and identifying moths, obviously. We also want to analyze functional traits. We've already noticed that after the hurricane, the bigger moth species have been sort of lost, and so we want to understand if body size, coloration, host plant it plays a role on how they respond. We want to do DNA barcoding of some of the species. We've also continued to monitor long-term. We've already monitored 2 summers after that, and we want to continue doing that as long as we can manage it. And so we want to look at long-term recovery of the assemblages as well. And we also collected caddisflies and beetles with these traps, and so we have them frozen, and we're waiting for interested collaborators to work on these insects so that we can also understand their response to hurricanes. Thank you very much, and I would be happy to take questions. No, they're natural occurring, yeah.
They're not native?
No, they're native, yeah. Sierra palms are native, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Yes, you.
So, like, richness can be affected by the size of forest and isolation and various other factors. Or have you explored, some of the other characteristics of the actual sites that might also be affecting richness?
Yes, of course. All the sites are located within the same forest, so they're not, the spatial scale is pretty small. And we want to do some sort of, we need to do some sort of spatial analysis to make sure they're not spatially correlated. But I don't think they probably have very similar like area, because it's a whole protected forest that we were in. And the light that we were using supposedly doesn't have as much distance attraction radius, so it can be like maybe around 50 feet around the light. So that makes it so that it doesn't attract moths from other areas of the forest. But it would be very interesting to look at landscape. But we would need really high definition photos to do that. Yeah.
How small can a moth be? What's the smallest?
Very, like a millimeter, I don't know, very, very small. Yeah, and our micro moths, we still have to do like a cutoff, because there's some that are so tiny that we can't even look at, it's very hard for us to work with.
Are there good keys for identifying them?
They're good keys for general families. We have a lot of morphospecies that we think we got them down to genus, but there hasn't been a lot of work on moths in Puerto Rico in a long time, so we think at least with species level we might have a lot of gaps. And we've been working with 2 museums in Puerto Rico to try to identify them, but we want to, one of the next steps also is to talk to experts and send samples to try to get our taxonomy as best we can make it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.